Before we begin, I have a couple of things to tell you. First, I have written a cookbook that has just gone on sale. It's called Country Music's Greatest Eats. It's a collaboration with Southern Living Magazine and Country Music Television, CMT. And in it, I profile 30 country music stars and their favorite family recipes. I talk to legends like the Oak Ridge Boys and Wynonna Judd, as well as newer acts like the Zac Brown Band and Florida Georgia Line. Check it out. It's on Amazon and wherever books are sold. Speaking of Southern Living, I'm happy to announce that Authentic South is featured in the June 2014 issue of the magazine. They've got a huge story in there called The A to Z Guide to Southern Food, and they wrote about us in the I category. That's I for Indie Food Media. Be sure and show Southern Living some love and join the conversation at hashtag Southern Food Now. All right, on to the show. Hunter Lewis is the executive editor at Southern Living Magazine. Before that, he had stints at the publications Bon Appetit and Savour. He grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, was a journalism major at UNC, and worked in several restaurants along the way. When he was first starting his career, Hunter landed a job as a beat reporter for the Herald-Sun newspaper in Durham. But after a few years, he began trying to reconcile his two loves of writing and food.
And so a buddy of mine who was a reporter said, you know what, you should go to culinary school. And then you should write about food. It's a good idea. So I looked into that and then realized that, the cooking to me was a lot like being an athlete. And I was a jock in high school and college. And being in restaurant kitchens kind of tapped into that adrenaline and that camaraderie and being on a team. And so I quit my job at the paper in 2004 and moved up to New York City. And I got a job at a restaurant called Barbuda with a chef named Jonathan Waxman. And I didn't know who the guy was. And it was very serendipitous, and I learned a lot. And that was my culinary school. That was my proving ground. And they broke me down, and I thought I was going to get fired every day for 6 months.
Why? I mean, what was happening? Were you?
I was the low man on the totem pole. I was the kitchen bitch,
right.
And I was told it every day. And I was, I worked for free for a month just to get on board, and then I became the lunch cook. And I was making $10 an hour in New York City in 2005. And we were working. You just paid your dues. It's the kind of thing as a cook aspiring to be a chef. You're paid a certain wage, but you're going to stay 12, 15 hours, and you're going to bleach the walk-in during service, and you're going to scrape the grill and do everything you're going to do as a low man. But anyway, it was a great training ground for me. It made me stronger. It made me a much better cook, and I just snapped one day. I mean, I was going to give up, and my chef had been yelling at me and he'd been on my case all week, and I went out by the Hudson River. And I just kind of looked out. Now, this is in the West Village. And I said, are you going to do this? Are you going to keep cooking, or are you just going to quit? And you moved back to North Carolina. And I went back in, and I kept cooking. But something changed. It wasn't instant, but something changed over time when I really started to get it. And I got Waxman's philosophy. And I realized his whole California and Italian and French aesthetic and philosophy was not much different than the South I knew and the way that Southerners cook. And once I really understood where he was coming from and what his point of view was, and once I relaxed at the stove, I became a much better cook. And then I fell in love with it. And then there was this, I cooked for a few years, but I've always had this question, do I cook or do I write? And I think I'm still asking myself that question. Am I a cook or am I a writer? And I'll tell you, cooking's a hell of a lot more fun than writing. A lot more fun.
Is it really? I mean, so...
Yeah, it's instantaneous, and there's instant gratification, and the deadline is immediate. It's not a month out, and I love being an editor, and I love being a writer, and I love the people that I come across in the job every day. But cooking is so instinctual, and you can, as a cook, I think cooks are pleasers. You want to make people happy, and you can tell if they're happy immediately once you serve them the food. The other thing too is I think cooking is when you're really doing it and when you're in the moment, you don't have to think. You're just doing it.
Yeah, it's a much slower process, and the gratification does not come as immediately, and it's with writing.
Yeah. You build this thing and you build this thing, and you go and you report, and then you start shaping it, and you come to understand this thing you're writing about, and then you chip away, and then you chip away, and you keep building, and then you chip. And sometimes you've done great, and oftentimes you've just done good, and that's okay. But yeah, I think cooking is more fun.
How do you scratch that itch?
Well, I would love to be in the test kitchen every day cooking with the crew. We've got a really, really talented crew in the Southern Living kitchen, but really it's about cooking at home. And the weeknights are hard. I mean, any weeknight cook will tell you when you're putting food on the table with family that, sometimes it's like triage, but the weekends are where it's fun. You can plan and you can be more leisurely, and for me it's about being outside at the grill and, cooking from the farmer's market. Take my 2.5-year-old Francis to Pepper Place Farmers Market in Birmingham, and we'll go and see what's there, and it's good. I mean, it's good for me because I get to get fresh ingredients, and it's good for her because she's learning, and she likes to be there and watch people and see how it all goes down.
And you can see that developing.
Yeah, and I can see it too with we don't have a garden per se, but we do have a blueberry bush and a blackberry bush and herbs and a few other things in containers, and she loves it. She'll pick the blackberries and blueberries, and she just wants to go up and smell it and taste it, and now she knows the words of what these things are, and she'll pinch the tarragon and put it up to her nose and take a big sniff. Very dramatic to show off for her dad, but it's cool.
Well, it sounds like she may get the drama from her dad if you're someone who walks out to the Hudson River to talk to yourself and have a very epic conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
That's a fairly cinematic, dramatic kind of.
Yeah, at the time it didn't feel that way. At the time it just felt like a huge heavy weight, but I was just not a very good cook, and Waxman told me it one time on the line. We were super busy, and it was a night we had like 350 covers, and I was fumbling the garnish on something, and he just looked at me, he goes, "Dude," he always said everything started with dude. I've said it a couple dudes, but he said, "Dude," he said, "you're such a glorified home cook." And he was right, and I knew it. And I think about that a lot now because that's what I am, and that's who my audience is. It's home cooks, and I've really embraced that. Yeah, I'm a glorified home cook.
But he never fired you.
No,
right?
No, he never fired me.
I mean, there had to be something to that. I mean, it could have been partially that. Well, I don't know. Somebody could have stepped right in after he got rid of you. So there was something. I don't know. He wanted to keep you around for a reason.
Yeah, and we had a good rapport. And my mentor there, a guy named Justin Smiley, who's now one of my best friends, and who's a really, really talented chef. And I called him my tour mentor. He was the guy that really rode me, and taught me. I think I followed some advice that a buddy of mine, Ed Brantley, gave me. Ed's from East North Carolina, near where my wife's from. He was a chef in the Triangle, and now based in Chapel Hill. And I called him up in New York, and I said, "I'm going to this job. What should I do?" And he said, "Buddy, you got to do 3 things." He said, "First, keep your f***ing mouth shut. Second, don't call in sick. And third, keep your head down." And I just kind of laughed. I said, "Okay, yeah," but he was so right. You just, that first year, you just got to keep your mouth shut. You got to be curious. You got to show up on time. You got to stay late, and you just go from there. And it's not about instant gratification. You gotta pay your dues, and you got to keep working and keep working. And I think I talk to a lot of kids now who are trying to decide, like I did. Do I go to culinary school? I don't know if I want to go into restaurants. What am I going to do with this career? Do you have any advice? And I give them the same advice that an intern told me. It's like, just work hard. It sounds easy, but you know, in this age where you want everything, you want it now, and you want a career in TV, it's no, you got to have a foundation. You might hit it big, but if you don't have that foundation, you're going to peter out and fizz out in a year.
In talking about the difference between cooking and writing, there is a lot of build up when you're putting together a story. There's a lot more planning that goes into it. There's a lot more of just more methodology, perhaps. I want to talk about this big story that you guys have out right now, the A to Z Guide to Southern Food, which I have to say thank you for including Authentic South in it.
Absolutely, Tanner.
As part of it, but I do want you to talk a little bit about planning a massive story like that. That's one of the biggest stories I've seen in the magazine in a long time that is that cohesive. Tell me about where that begins.
Well, it begins with the idea that we want to do a food issue, and it's going to be in June, and got to fill some pages. So what are we going to do? I think we've gotten to the point, and with Southern Living, we're known for our recipes, and we're known for our trusted recipes that come out of this great test kitchen, the South's most trusted kitchen. But we need to do a better job of storytelling. Southern Living was rooted in that. If you look at the issues from the late 60s and the 70s and 80s and 90s, there's a ton of good stories. And I mean, Tanner, you're a storyteller yourself. It's what you do. But with the recipes, we needed more context. We needed the sidebars and the essays, and we needed to build around that. So with this package, we just started thinking about, all right, what are the places and who are the people and what are the recipes that we're really excited about right now that speak to the South? Southern cooking is all about the past, and it's all about looking ahead. You have to look backwards and you have to look forwards. You have to think about your traditions and rituals and your roots and where we've come from. And with this package, we wanted to think about where Southern food is going. And as long as we had that balance, it's always messy. It's never perfect, but as long as we had that balance of old stories and old touchstones and then new things, the things that were exciting us now, then we thought it could be good. And so, it's everything from a tribute to John Edgerton, who just died last year, and a marinade recipe to Jones Valley Teaching Farm, which is my favorite place in Birmingham. And it's very much of the now of taking this urban farm model and really giving it a 2.0 approach of taking it into the classrooms to teach these kids about vegetables and how to eat healthier. And it's about community. And we've brought some of these kids and their families into the Southern Living Kitchen to cook. And that's been one of the most powerful things about my job at Southern Living, is to watch the light bulb come on with these kids, where they make this connection between what's growing on this farm, how to cook it at the stove, and then to sit down with their family at the tasting table and eat this meal that they cooked. It's a pretty cool thing with a Southern Living recipe. So Jones Valley's in there, and they're very much a part of who we are now and what we've been doing as a crew. And so then we just thought, okay, well, let's make this thing really personal. What are the things we love right now? We love Jones Valley. We love Kamado style grills, so they're going to be in our barbecue portion of this. We love Aaron Franklin as a pitmaster. We love Whole Hog Barbecue in Eastern North Carolina. We love this movement going on right now, this whole agricultural renaissance that's feeding the way that we cook. I think just like we have to remind ourselves that we're storytellers, and this is our duty as Southerners to tell good stories. Well, it's also our duty to grow good stuff. We've always done it, and we got away from it. So there's a big through line in the package about this agricultural renaissance, whether it's homesteaders or back to the landers, or you or I growing a potato garden in our backyard, or going to a farmer's market.
What do you think that represents? What is the bigger idea, the bigger shift that is happening, beyond just just you and Southern Living identifying this happening in the South. Why is this happening?
I think it comes down to good taste, and I think it comes down to food knowledge and people understanding what good food is now. I think we got away from it in the in the age of convenience and a 10-ounce can of cream of mushroom soup. It's the can that launched 1 million dishes, but that's not the tie that binds the Southern food. But I think for a long time that's what we got associated with. I love a good casserole, but that's not the only thing that marks Southern food. So I think this whole movement and this proliferation of farmers markets and this rise of gardens and edible produce, I think it speaks to people wanting something that tastes good, something that was raised correctly, and people want this authentic, rootsy thing, and I think that the whole edible movement is a part of that. And I think chefs have been a point of the spear of it. They've done a great job of being these messengers of what tastes good and how you should properly cook something. And while we're not a magazine that is a big chef magazine, I credit them for, even convincing the farmers to grow this stuff. I think about it in the Triangle in Chapel Hill, where I'm from, after the whole big tobacco fiasco. It was the chefs and the farmers who came in and said, we can grow a $3 head of organic lettuce and we're going to make some money. And there was an audience for it, there was a market for it, and if you look at the rise of these organic farms and this whole local food movement, it's just taken off.
I'd be interested in hearing what your thoughts are. The local food movement, some would argue, probably did not even start in America, but in America, we can certainly gaze over to the West and start looking
Absolutely.
in Northern California. But is that, do you think that the chefs who are in the South now, that particular wave that began in, what was the 70s, 80s,
Mm-hmm.
Has that wave finally made it to the South?
Absolutely.
What's happening there?
Well, it's really interesting. If you look back at the cookbooks written by Southerners that really, really matter, that still have a lasting legacy, you talk about Edna Lewis, you talk about Bill Neal. These books had the same viewpoint as Alice Waters. Alice Waters is credited with this whole movement, and she should be. But the South was eating like this. It was eating like this, and it was documented, and people like Edna Lewis and Bill Neal put pen to paper and showed it. But this whole movement that came out of Berkeley and that came out of Northern California, I think, convinced the country that it was possible at a time when, down south, people were eating at country clubs. There weren't a whole lot of places to go out and eat. It was still about home cooking. I think it's really taken hold in the South, and it's not a new thing. It's just a new thing that is looking backwards to an old thing. It skipped a couple generations, and I think I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's only going to get bigger to the point we don't have to talk about local food anymore. It's just there. Yeah, it better be local, better be grown nearby. Forget the politics about it. If it's grown nearby, it's going to taste better because it's fresher.
Yeah, the fact that standard is now raised to that point.
Yeah,
that's a huge thing.
And it's not. It's still not a. I think it's still a small thing. When you talk about food access and you talk about kids being able to get healthy ingredients, it's there's this romantic notion that we should all be eating local, and it's the way to be. The fact of the matter is it needs to build, it needs to continue to grow before this is a common thing for everybody. Because let's face it, this stuff's expensive. That head of lettuce or that bunch of radishes is expensive. But I'm hoping that we get to a point where people demand that kind of flavor and that kind of taste, and that becomes such a common denominator that your basic supermarket produce is no longer good enough. You still got a ways to go. But it's also interesting, I think about when I was cooking in Northern California, when Waxman opened a restaurant up there in a little hippie town called Sebastopol. You know, that whole local movement, I remember the San Francisco Chronicle documenting these locavores and these people that would only eat within a certain square mile radius. This wasn't happening in New York yet, and that was '07. You know, I mean, people were going to the green markets in New York, but when I got back to New York in '08, it had started to really take root there, you know, and then it began to take root here too. So it's a good thing that's happening.
What's inspiring you right now?
I think what's inspiring me is just being out in the South and, you know, going to cities like Atlanta or Knoxville or Charleston or Nashville or Asheville, you know, Greenville, wherever it is, no matter how big the market is. I think the South is just, it's crackling with electricity right now. And I'm inspired by the fact that the South that I left in '04 is way different than the South that I came back to in 2012. You know, it's a much more dynamic place. You know, and I mean, a lot of it's personal. I mean, I left when I was 24 and I came back when I was, you know, 34. So I'm different too. But everywhere you go, there's this energy of people making cool stuff. You know, and they're making cool jeans. They're cooking delicious food. They're designing great tables. You know, the whole idea of the Southern maker is really exciting to me right now. And there's this energy down here that things are possible, you know, and that's exciting to me.
Hunter, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Tanner. Enjoyed it.
I would like to thank Hunter Lewis from Southern Living. Remember to check out the June 2014 issue and follow the social conversation at #SouthernFoodNow. The special music today is from Joel Madison Blunt. Hear more at joelmadisonblunt.com. As always, our theme music is by Chris Hoke and Brett Estep. And to see pictures of Hunter and to hear more episodes of the show, click on over to AuthenticSouth.com. You can also hear us at WFAE.org, Public Radio Exchange, and on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and SoundCloud. Until we go south again, thanks for listening.